Welcome to the Searchlight Sessions. I am your host, Maggie McClure, and today we have special guest Taylor Johnson. Welcome, Taylor. Thank you so much for joining us.
What's up? Of course.
It's great to have you here today. Our guest, Taylor, is a music producer. He's created music that has been used in ads for Verizon, Wal-Mart, Nike, and a ton of other huge brands, as well as in movies and TV shows. You'd expect he might be living in LA or Nashville or New York, but he is right here in Oklahoma. And we're so excited to get to talk to you today. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in music.
That's a tricky question. I was definitely one of those kids that, for some reason, maybe one that I couldn't even explain, I always was just drawn to music. My mom and dad were both, neither one of them were musicians, but they're both very avid music listeners. And music was definitely shoved on me, like albums and things like that. Were like, hey, listen to this. And also had an uncle who played guitar. And I want to say it was my 5th birthday whenever I got my first guitar. And it was kind of just definitely at first, it was totally just a kid doing something or just playing with a toy that I got. And then, it just kind of manifested itself from there. And then somewhere along that line, I realized oh, okay, this is the thing that I actually like doing more than anything else. So it's probably a super standard story, but that's really about it. There's nothing crazy romantic about it.
Really cool though. And would you say your primary instrument is guitar?
It was for a long time, and I don't know if it's just the way that music has gone nowadays or whatever, but I definitely find myself anymore, I play keys more than anything, whether it be synths or pianos or whatever. But yes, as far as what I quote unquote learned music on, it was definitely guitar.
Okay, very cool. Awesome. So tell us about how you got your first sync placement and what it was for, what song it was for. Do you remember? You've had so many.
I think so. I got into it because of my friend Chad Copeland. We had kind of talked about doing one of these projects forever because I knew that he was getting into it and all of that. And I guess for a long time I just didn't really realize how lucrative it actually could be. And so whenever I realized that, I was like, oh, okay, well then yeah, let's try this. And so we made this first record by this group that we have called Chair Model. And that was 2017, I think. And I do vividly remember the first thing we got. The first thing we got was, it was for this song off of that record called Barely Shook. And I vividly remember it was $7.35 was my cut. And I was even though it was nothing, I was just jacked about the fact that someone was using it for something. So yeah, there's a pretty big in between as far as price range goes on what you can make.
Yes, there is. That's so crazy. What is your most exciting placement that you've had?
Ooh. I don't know. I feel it's probably incredibly cliche to say this, but the Apple commercials are always cool just because it's Apple. But there's been a lot of we've had a ton of stuff on shows like Shameless and things like that. And whenever there's one of your songs behind Katie Seagal or something like that, someone who you grew up watching, whenever it's in the background of a scene of an actress that you those are really cool to me. Just for no other fact other than that.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you on that. There's really nothing quite like that. Something that you poured your heart and soul into, wrote and recorded and spent hours and days working on, and
yeah, exactly.
Featured in a way like that, it's just such a cool experience.
Of course.
So you had your first placement in 2017. Is that about the time that you decided, okay, this is really cool, I think I'm going to do more sync licensing?
Oh, hang on. Someone's trying to mess with us here. Let me fix it. There we go. Yeah, I think, it was kind of like, if I'm being brutally honest, it was the first like actual lucrative one that was like, okay, let's do more of this. And I think the longer that time's gone on, it's just kind of been more and more evident to me that, like, it's a volume game. The stories of people making a bunch of money off one song are few and far between. Like, you're much more likely, if you're trying to make a living or whatever, you're much more likely to do it by having a large catalog. And, because, like, speaking of the $7.35 one from earlier, it's like, if you get $57.35 things a day, that amounts to something. It's not $7 anymore, which, if you're able to do that day in and day out, and then also get $50,000, $100,000 things, here and there, like, it ends up being, as good or more than an actual salary, like, comparable to someone my age in the business world, with a quote unquote real job or whatever.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, can you talk a little bit more about, you mentioned that you have various projects, and speaking of quantity, why not just have one band and have all of the songs under that one band? Why do you have different projects?
Really, it's just the easiest way to be able to continue and I'm trying to think of the right way to articulate that. It's the easiest way to keep the wheels turning without oversaturating one certain thing. I mean, there's obviously, different trains of thought that go into that, but another one of the huge things is being able to do different sounds, like, okay, here's our pop band, and here's our cinematic, dark, ex-ambassadors band, whatever. Like, there's obviously, different singers that their voice lends itself better to this, to that, whatever. And, goes without saying, like, different shows have different needs and all of the above.
Yeah. So really, you're not locked into one genre.
Right. Totally.
To experiment stylistically, which is great. How many bands are you in right now for your sync licensing projects?
I honestly couldn't tell you. I would say we probably have upwards of like 20 projects. And I mean, some of those have definitely like turned into passion projects that actually play shows and stuff like that, because, like, obviously if you're making a bunch of stuff, you're going to love some of it. But, yeah, there's quite a few.
That's so cool. Well, while you're talking about that, I mean, can you explain to our viewers what the difference is between a sync licensing project versus being an artist or a band that that maybe is solely focusing on that one project, and how do you go about managing that?
I feel like, so kind of what I alluded to a second ago, like, I feel like a couple of those things that started as sync projects have ended up being, passion projects, or like things that would blur the lines on the difference between the two. Like, we definitely have these periods that we'll go through where it's like, let's do 5 songs like this because this is working. It's not because it's our favorite kind of music or whatever. Yeah, I think the biggest difference would be, it's people in bands most of the time, it's primarily like their sole focus. And doing this, it's, one of many things. However, with that being said, like whenever you're playing producer at a studio, you're already doing that. So like if you're already working with a bunch of different bands, it's kind of not that different to me. It just kind of feels like I have a bunch of passion projects. Like there are 100% projects that I like more than others. But yeah, I guess like one of the things that I've always tried to recognize is that if you're making songs trying to make money, like if you're making songs without the actual interest in it, just under the guise of I'm trying to make money, I feel like more often than not that comes across in the music. And I feel like the songs that get synced the most are there's definitely still a need for quality. And so I feel like the ones that get used the most are definitely like the ones that feel real. Like they're the ones that, you spent the most time into, or, whatever.
Yeah. How do you make songs for licensing keep that real appeal, but also be think friendly? Like, what are the elements that you try to incorporate to songs that might be appealing to someone wanting to license a song?
Yeah, I think like that's kind of like whenever I explain this stuff to people, that's kind of always what I say. It's more production than it is the writing part, because like we definitely still try to write real songs. Like I want one of these pop songs that we do, like I want it to still have legs of its own on an acoustic guitar. Like it's not just like a bag of tricks and that's it. So like in my opinion, the way that I always think about everything is like, okay, good song. Whoops, there we go. Good song first, and then you produce it to fit whatever category you're wanting it to fit into.
Right. Yeah. And thinking of licensing, do you create different mixes? Do you do something differently that maybe artists going into the studio without licensing in mind? Do you do extra things that maybe people should be aware of and consider when they're in the studio?
Yeah, that's where that whole conversation gets blurry though. Is like I've had this conversation before. It's like I think it's just so dependent on genre that's really the biggest thing. Because like my stock answer that I was about to say whenever you first started that question was like, yeah, we do more, like little sound nuggets and stuff like this on that music. But I also feel like if you listen to a Beyonce record, it's the same way. Like and that's not made for licensing. So I'm saying like, I think it's just dependent on the genre more than anything. So I don't feel like the stuff that we do that's pop music, for example, I don't feel like it's that out of line with other pop music. I think it's obviously going to be a different workflow than doing a country record or something. But yeah, I mean, you talking about different mixes, we definitely do that. There's always instrumentals and then TV mixes and main mixes, which the mastering guys like that because they're making more money off of you.
Yeah, that's awesome. For those who don't know, can you explain what a TV mix is? So
TV mixes are the instrumental is obviously just the song without words. The TV mixes are typically with background vocals without lead vocals. So just the BGVs, just the other little vocal things that might be in the song. And usually, if you have those 3 mixes of each song, the intention is like if a music supervisor is putting you on a commercial and there is narration on it, they can play, however long they want of the song with lyrics. And then whenever the narration starts or whatever, they can cut to the instrumental at that point. So you're not singing about cherries behind the side effects of Chantix or whatever.
That's great. I love it. So they can essentially make their own mix with the combination of the main instrumental and TV mix.
Right. And I feel like it's becoming even more and more common for them to ask for stems, which is kind of weird to me because I always wonder, I'm like, what do you need these 3 versions of the mix for if you're getting the stems? You could make whatever you wanted. But yeah, I guess different agencies ask for different things.
Yeah, I've definitely learned that as well. And you just try to deliver whatever anyone needs, just to try to help guarantee guarantee the placement that you're working on.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just whatever is the smoothest road forward. That's always what I'm into.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about what should you deliver to people when you're pitching. The quality is definitely important, right? It can't be a demo.
Yeah.
It's basically a finished product.
Of course. Yeah, I would argue that whenever it comes to a lot of the sync stuff, like fidelity is probably one of the biggest parts of it. And I guess that's not that far from the truth for other things that aren't sync too. But I mean, it's just like, it's, in my experience, as important as the song, because it's, if, someone's using your song in a commercial, they want it to sound competitive against, whatever else came before it or after it. And they're not going to want to use that if it sounds like it was made in a bedroom or whatever. And so
Right.
Production and fidelity are definitely a big part of it, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And in my experience, even if a film producer or director requests a demo, it's always best to go ahead and send the finished product, because a lot of these people they're not music people. So
yeah,
would you agree?
That's another thing. I mean, like, that's another 1,000-mile conversation that I could talk about for hours. But it's like, in my experience, no matter how much someone says, like, send me a demo, I can. They don't know your intentions. Like, they don't know where it's gonna go. So, like, I would rather finish it than put some sort of like false idea in someone's head, or they listen to it and it sounds bad because it's a demo, and then they think, they have a sour taste in their mouth about that song because of that.
Yeah, it's hard for people that aren't musically inclined, that are in the film or TV industry, to be able to hear the potential of something. I found.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to, like, someone who isn't a musician, it's kind of hard to be like, no, like, the vocals are gonna have more high end on them here in a little bit. Like, they don't know what that means, nor do they care. They just want it to sound like a real song, and that's it.
Exactly. Yeah. Cool. Well, could you explain to our viewers what is the difference between what you do and a composer for film and TV? What's the difference?
So I think composer typically has the connotation, correct me if I'm wrong, of classical music, right?
Yes, generally.
That's what I thought. I'm just going to show my ignorance here. Yeah, but that also kind of brings me to another point of, like, a lot of people, and I've definitely done it before, typically a composer is writing to a product that it's already there, right? Like they're watching it and writing the music according to that. And I definitely know people who do music that way. And that brings me to another point that I didn't talk about earlier is we do not do that. We essentially create music that we think would work in certain scenarios, and then it exists. And if someone wants to use it for something, they can. It's not chasing the dog's tail as far as like trying to do something specifically that's going to please someone.
Yeah. Thank you for talking about that. And talking about your songs being used after the fact of a product, you don't know what it's going to be used for.
Right. Whereas, I mean, you can try to target yourself for whatever you think, or you can, you can like try to cater it to whatever you want to cater it to. But at the end of the day, like, unless you're working with a really targeted thing or like know the person that you're working with, it could be used for anything. Like, I mean, I've said this a million times, but like, I feel like over the years, like some of the songs that I think aren't ever going to do anything are the ones that do the best. And the ones that you think are going to do the best might have had one thing in the last 3 years. And you never know like what element is going to be the thing that drives it home for a bunch of people. Like, you may have like a specific lyric that's like resonating with, culture at the moment or something like that. And I feel like those kind of things happen all the time, and they're kind of, no matter how intentional you try to be, they're kind of out of your control.
Yeah. So you're creating these songs not knowing where they're going to end up.
Totally.
When they get used, are they just for that one product or ad or TV show, or how does that work?
You mean at the time?
Well, so for people who aren't aware of what kinds of deals you can have, let's talk about non-exclusive versus exclusive. If one of your songs gets used in an Apple commercial,
totally.
How does that work?
So a lot of the time, in my experience, like the terms that typically go into that kind of thing are, say you get a Verizon commercial that runs on MSNBC for 6 weeks. It's usually really specific terms, like it can't be used on any other cell phone provider on MSNBC for the duration of that license. Like, it could be used on anything else on any other channel, or even that channel for a different product. I'm sure that there are a million different ways that works, but that's just typically how it's worked in my experience. I know some people do have exclusive deals where it's like, this song cannot be used for anything else for the next 12 months, which then you have to, calculate your risk versus reward of what that song could potentially do in the next year versus, however much money this particular commercial is or whatever. But yeah, I mean, in my experience, that's typically what's happened.
Okay. And typically, would you say an exclusive placement like that would need to pay way more than something that wasn't exclusive?
Yeah, they're typically a lot more money. And just in complete transparency, I've never experienced that. I've never had a song asked for 100% exclusivity. It's always been like what I said a second ago, like it's, this can't be used on other cell phone commercials for 6 weeks on MSNBC between 7 and 9 p.m. Like, it's always so specific. However, I do know other people that do this that have had actual exclusive deals.
Yeah, and it's probably good because you can have the song used in a lot more of other things if it's not tied up with them. So talk
Totally.
about licensing agents and music libraries. Have you ever had an exclusive deal with a licensing agent or a library where they represent your catalog and no one else does? Or what is your take on that?
So all of the agencies that we work with, I would say the vast majority of them pretty much only do exclusive deals. But there are a couple projects that, just because of the way that all the chips fell into place, work with multiple agencies. And I think music libraries, in my experience, is you have a higher volume of smaller licenses because there's people from YouTube or wanting music for their wedding video. Like there's that demographic of video makers getting on there, getting those kinds of things, which, as I said before, there's 100% nothing wrong with getting a lot of small licenses. The agencies that aren't music libraries, in my opinion, those are the ones who get you more infrequent but larger licenses because they're, you know, whether it be they have a relationship with a writer on a TV show or, you know, a network executive, like I'm sure it happens a million different ways. And if I'm being honest, I really don't even know ours. It's just kind of like a, you know, as long as the beast keeps eating, just keep feeding it. Like that's really how we treat it.
Right. I know from my experience, having multiple non-exclusive deals has definitely been beneficial. Just to have more people working the catalog and allowing me to work it as well. And for our viewers today, just letting them know that a licensing agent is someone that has your music and they have the right to pitch your songs and in all their different forms. So the main mixes, instrumentals, TV mixes, to different TV shows, movies, ads, and even more things like video games or events and conferences. There's lots of opportunities for music to get licensed, especially now with all the content that's being released. And we at Searchlight Music are a licensing agency. So that is one of the things that we offer. And we're really excited to be able to do that and represent Oklahoma talent in doing so. Let's talk a little bit about your advice to up and coming producers, songwriters, artists. What steps would you recommend for someone to take who wants to develop their sync catalog and get more involved with licensing, Taylor?
I think two very big things that I have always tried to consistently be aware of are just be analytical and be realistic. Like those are two of probably the best traits that you could possibly possess. Analytical in the sense of like, if your goal is to sell music, then be aware of what's selling. And being realistic is like that's all encompassing about being realistic of your expectations, being realistic about, is this actually a quality product? And being able to objectively step back and listen to your music as, through the ears of someone else. And I feel like that's, definitely maybe sometimes misconstrued as like being hard on your music, or I mean, I definitely do it. But I think in my experience, and that's just totally my personality and stuff, it's like that's what's made it better, consistently. It's just being able to just take the love out of it just because you made it, and be able to step back and me listen to one of my songs 2 weeks later and be like, actually, this kind of sucks and I don't like it. So someone else isn't going to like it either. And I think having the ability to do that is probably an important thing.
And that's not an easy thing to do.
It's not. And it really, if you've spent a lot of time on something and then you get that feeling afterwards, it definitely sucks. But, however, the opposite is double the reward as well.
Yes. That's awesome. Well, would you say that your contacts and relationships in the music and film industry have been pretty pivotal with your success in sync licensing?
I would say not at all, honestly. It's like, I got into doing this stuff with friends. I mean, I've of course met people from it, but I don't think that it's been like a huge pivotal thing in my life. It's just I still try to find a healthy balance of like working on, you know, albums that I love that a TV show would never buy because it's too weird or whatever. Like I still love those things, and I still try to find a healthy balance of working on a good mix of those two things, because I feel like if you can bring some of that stuff into the sync world and just pepper it in there in a smart way, then it's going to make your stuff stand out. But to get back to your original question, it might have more than I'm giving it credit for at the moment, but my gut reaction is that it didn't really change anything. Just kind of kept chugging along, doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I mean, that says that this is what you want to do and you're making it happen, and that it all started from a love of music and you doing it with your friends. And like you said, if your heart's in the right place and you're doing it because you love it, there's a much greater chance for success in that. And that's really cool to hear your thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I said before, I just can't reiterate that enough. It's like, no one bought a record because it sounded like the Beatles. They bought the Beatles records because the Beatles made that sound. And I just feel like there's a lot to be taken away from like that thought process. It's like, obviously you're always going to be influenced by people, and that's, you know, going to shape the way that you do things. But like, there's definitely something to be said about not doing the same thing as everyone else, because all you're doing whenever you do that is just increasing your oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. You're increasing your competition if you're just doing the same thing that everyone else is, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit, why Oklahoma?
I don't know that I have a very good answer for that. Because we lived here. Yeah, I'm actually from Louisiana, and we moved here because of my dad. He had some family that lived here, and he was military. And anyways, yeah, I just grew up and went to high school about 20 miles away from the city in Yukon, and my wife's job only exists in Oklahoma, and so I don't see any move in the near future, and that's fine with me because Oklahoma is a great place in my opinion.
Yes,
I would so much rather, speaking of increasing your competition, it's like, if you're if you're someone in Oklahoma City, you are no one when you go to LA or Nashville or whatever.
Yes.
And so
I can speak to that, you know, coming from Oklahoma and moving to Los Angeles. It's definitely eye-opening to become a very small fish in a large pond, going to a city.
Yeah, and paying 8 times as much just to function. Like, no thanks.
Exactly. Well, we're so glad that you have decided to stay in Oklahoma. It's awesome because, you know, there's this illusion that you have to move to a music city to be successful. So we're very...
And I know like I know so many people that do so many quote unquote real things that live here. I mean, like the one of the ways you can look at it is, you know, like even if someone who lives in Los Angeles, like they're not working consistently, and you know, we can live in Oklahoma and get on an airplane and still do things in Los Angeles if we want to. Like it's not this all-encompassing, like you live in Oklahoma and you only work on things in Oklahoma from now on. Like it's honestly not that much different. And I just feel like in this day and age with the internet and everything else, it's like it kind of doesn't really matter that much where you live.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, considering COVID and not being able to travel and just all of the things that the pandemic has brought upon all of us, how has that affected you? Has it affected you much being able to work in your studio?
No, I always feel like a spoiled brat whenever I have this conversation with people, but this year didn't really change for us. Like it was, I mean, we definitely maybe noticed a little hit in the department of like how many things we were getting for a while because, you know, all the productions are shut down and all that kind of stuff. But like as far as continuing to work and stuff like that, like it's pretty much just been business as usual, and you know, just kind of keep chugging along because there's not much else to do.
Well, that's great to hear. That's awesome. Okay, just a couple things left. One, take us through a day in the life of Taylor Johnson at Lunar Manor. What do you do on a daily basis? Tell us.
That's very, very different from day to day. Like some days it's like I have a lot of, I'll do a week where it's just writing, you know, like we'll try to come up with 4 ideas a day for 5 days. Have weeks where it's like just mixing. Sometimes I'll have days where it's like just adding sprinkles to songs, like little nuggets and things like that. And then sometimes, you know, have days where we're not working on any licensing stuff whatsoever, which is probably, I would say 40 to 50% of my time, like working on bands, you know, records or songs or singles or whatever.
Very cool. That's awesome. So you are working on music in the studio pretty much all day, you know, throughout the week during regular.
Definitely. It's it kind of, you know, every now and then gotta poke your head out of your hidey hole and have a day off. I think a lot of people don't realize that like they think working in a studio and doing stuff is, you know, like this like lax chill kind of thing, and it's like most of the time it's like 12 14-hour days, and it's definitely brutal.
Yeah, I know. And you're such a hard worker and it shows. What's the fastest you've had to create a song? Like, did you have less than a day to do something? How fast have you had to?
We've definitely done stuff like that before. I don't know that we ever necessarily had to, but we try to keep a healthy balance of speed and quality. Because I mean, obviously, you know, with anything else in life, you can sit there and tinker with stuff forever. But
right.
Try to be pretty cognizant of hitting that point on a song where you're like, okay, this is done. I'm just messing with this now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm sure we've like made a final product in a day at some point, but I would say that it's uncommon and not typically the way that I work. I'm already high strung enough. I don't need that.
I know. We've had to do that before too, and it's definitely not ideal.
Yeah.
But you got to do what you got to do sometimes.
Exactly. You got to do whatever needs to be done.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that you'd like to share that we haven't talked about yet? Remember, our audience is up and coming people in the entertainment industry. And again, we're really excited to have you on today. It's awesome to get to talk to you and hear about your perspective and all the awesome things that you're doing and working on. And it's really encouraging to know that you can stay in your home state in Oklahoma. And I know you're from Louisiana, but you can stay here.
I grew up here, so it counts.
Okay. You can stay here and work and do what you love and work with your friends and stay busy even during a pandemic. It's very encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, as far as advice goes, I feel like I'm so just like one track minded whenever it comes to stuff that like everything that I know about is stuff we already talked about, but just like seeing the writing on the wall, if it's like people wanting to get into this stuff, there's so much stuff that's being built right now in Oklahoma City to facilitate more movies and more shows being done. So those opportunities are only going to get more common and higher in volume, So like, I feel like if people want to get into it, now is not a bad time to do it.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you on that. Awesome. Well, thank you again for being here and really insightful conversation. It's awesome to hear about everything you've got going on. And yeah, we really appreciate you and excited to hear your projects. Can you tell us just a few of your bands so that some of the viewers can check them out?
Of course, yeah. First off, thank you for having me. Secondly, there are several, like more of the probably, I guess, quote unquote popular ones. Our chair model. There's one that we have called Golden Face, which is one word, and then there's one called King Rose, and all three of those are they're laid on pretty thick on television. So like those are three that do pretty well. We have a ton of things that are in various states of being finished or already out, and yeah, number one goal is just keep the train moving. That's really all it takes.
Yeah, so make good music, keep the faith, be proactive, make real music, do it from the heart, and keep going. That's what I'm getting from
exactly. Those are probably the best bullet points that you could give anyone. That probably applies to a lot of things broader than just music. But yeah, I mean, just do it. You'll eventually, figure out what you're good at, and then you can just hound that down until you can't anymore.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Taylor, for the Search.
Of course.
It's so good to have you. And just a reminder that this video series is designed to help up-and-comers in the entertainment industry to expand ways that they can be successful. Stay tuned for some takeaways on this session to help with your success. Bye, Taylor.
Bye.